was that we had in our program, and I was just reading our program, and in our program we said that we would really be keen to have ideas for action. I thank Elena for four, and really I think very good ideas. So we're looking to think about what are the takeaways. Some of you have been here for 2 days, and there's been a lot of information and a lot of thought and a lot of conversation. So we would really like you to, you might just jot them down as well, before you leave. We have had a couple of people who've been scribing all the way through, and so we will be taking what they have written. So that is going to be a fantastic thing. But as we ended this conference, we were very keen to say we would have things to say pop online, that these were the ideas for action that came out with respect to these different areas we've been talking about, respect to professional things, with respect to civil society, with respect to education and research. So if you've got something in your head that's absolutely been, sort of bubbling away, please write it down and maybe bring it up at the end, or you can email it. But in this last part, we're very happy to have Roberta Gratz here, and we tasked Roberta with sitting and thinking and absorbing, and to give us a bit of a wrap-up. Yesterday we had 2 wrap-ups. We had one from Justin Garrett Moore, and we had one from Jackie Klopp. So we thought we'd give you a few minutes now to wrap up and make some sense of what you've been hearing, and presumably some ideas for action. And then to finish it off, we will see whether Geeta and Elliot, and then draw on you to be thinking also those ideas that I've just asked you to think about. Maybe we'll have a shout out of ideas. I don't know how we'll do it, but we'll think of something. But we do have to finish probably in 25 minutes because there's a class coming in. So thank you, Roberta. Roberta, I think, is well known, a journalist, an urban critic, has great titles for books, and I'm sure many of you know her. So let's give you some space. Thanks.
This is on. I'd rather do this than try to make everyone hear me through the other. First of all, I'm gonna comment and add 2 things in order that we heard them today. But first I have to say, as somebody who's been writing about this for more decades than I'd like to remember, it is so refreshing today to hear how far we have come in the last couple of decades, where everything was siloed, and in the profession of most of you, too many people thought the answer was all about design, and communities weren't even recognized as worth talking to. So on an overall basis, I really feel very positive in terms of what I've heard today, because I don't get to hear a lot of this stuff too often. So let me go through, I want to just comment 2 things on what Elliot said. It is true in every city. Transit is key. It's true in this city, in every American city, and certainly around the globe. And the interesting thing is the pushback, even when you think of the kind of transit systems all the cities of this country had, and some are trying to get back to. Before they were all the streetcars were wiped out for the rubber tires. Now, the interesting dilemma with getting back to transit is the pushback that you get from the automobile and airport, aerospace lobbies. They don't want to let Congress fund transit. So part of what I'm going to try to include in each comment is beware of surprises and pushback, and be ready for them. The other thing that Elliot said, which is so true, and God knows if we'll ever get there, is we need to spend money on the right things, and there's no way that that is happening so easily. Okay, starting in the beginning, let me say a couple of comments, specifically New York. The fact is that we could, in New York City, increase our affordable housing numbers without any new construction, developer construction. All we need to do is legalize the secondary unit, the grandmother complex, the student apartment, whatever you want to call it, in every overly single-family zone neighborhood in this city. There's probably a lot of illegal units as there are. We should legalize them. They would not be as resistant to that as they are resistant to the new construction that is too big for a lot of single-family homes. And legalizing with funding the illegal basements. The number of units available is astronomical, and the problem is, and here's the pushback, everything in New York City depends on being developer-oriented. These two ideas, which could do things fast and easy, have no developer input. They might have small construction input, but not developer input. Ted made a very important point that is not realized in this city, and that is the density issue, where he showed that the Marcus Garvey four-story housing has more density than the 17-story on the 50 acres. In this city, we have let the definition of density be defined by height. No one realizes that even under urban renewal, when neighborhoods with multiple units were wiped out and replaced by high-rise housing, it was meant to and succeeded to de-densify the neighborhood. All those high-rises, God bless Robert Moses and who else, de-densified the neighborhood. So we have to change the conversation in this city and elsewhere. I was interested in the Ecuador examples and a few others. The informal communities of the world should inform the formal. What we see happening is, if we really want to listen to communities, look at what they build and why. I'm not suggesting that they are the optimum, but there is your feedback, and there we need to learn from, not replace, as we've seen in some of those, that Sao Paulo photograph, which is spread around the world as a perfect example. But then we did see an example of where the informal community was not so different than the official, the formal, the policy the government built. So learning from people includes learning from the informal communities. And so many places in the world where those communities exist, instead of trying to replace them, we should be putting in the infrastructure to make them live, survive, and grow in an incremental way. And then here we saw a lot of good ideas today about what is being done and what could be done. But the reality is that what is being built around the world in most cities, most countries, would make Corbusier smile. It's one place after another of high-rise prison kind of housing. So it's like hearing all of this today is like being in a Never Land. You're all making an impact, but the reality is so big and so different. And I don't have a solution to that other than to recognize in a film that both Gita and I were involved in, Citizen Jane, about Jane Jacobs, there are film shots upon shots of the housing that is going up around the world. It would make Corbusier smile, it would make Moses smile, and all the others like them, because that's the reality of what is actually being built. We know more about what China is doing than other countries, but it's happening everywhere. Now, over the years, there's really, and this is encouraging, there is a reality of mixing and matching instead of, one form is a response to everything, and that's very good. I want to build on something Ted said about how it is possible to get middle and upper income people to move into low income neighborhoods. I would add, you can't get upper income neighborhoods or even middle income neighborhoods to let low income move in easily. But upper income people have been moving into low income neighborhoods for decades. What do you think gentrification is all about? All of the slums or the low-income neighborhoods of our cities across the country, and I wrote about them in a gentrification. When I wrote about it in one of my earlier books, it was a plus. It was people moving into neighborhoods with vacancies and deteriorated housing that was being fixed up, and when they moved in, city services improved for all the people who were there. The issue is, and gentrification is highly misunderstood. The issue is, we know, displacement. If this city or any other city really cared about displacement, there are ways and policies that can help people stay in their neighborhood. One of the issues is when neighborhoods improve and the taxes go up and the low-income people can't afford it, there are places that have pushed the tax increase to the future at the point of sale, so they don't have to burden the current tenant. There should be low-income loans to low-income people who can't afford to keep up their home. So the issue should be helping the people in place. But I come back to the same thing over and over again. The problem in this city, at least, and I think in most, is if it isn't developer-oriented, it isn't a city hall policy. That's where direction needs to be focused. Okay. I love the education program in Bed-Stuy with the community gardens. And here, the interesting thing about the community gardens is they are the best example of what should be a goal for everything, which is really including hands-on community and the children. More focus, I suggest, should be on involving the children. Let me tell you one little story about Curitiba, Brazil. Brilliant former mayor. He couldn't get the garbage trucks into a very narrow road, crowded community, and they were starting a recycling program. So they encouraged the children to bring plastic recyclables to school. Number one, at the end of the school year at Christmas time, all the children got toys made out of recyclable material. But what also happened is the children got the parents to focus on the recycling so that the children wound up educating the parents. This happened in the Edible Schoolyard, one of the post-Katrina remedies in New Orleans. They had the first of Alice Waters' edible schoolyards, and what they found was the kids were going home and saying, "Hey, Ma, look, we can make this." And suddenly the diets in the family was changing because the schools were the children were going home with lessons from school and changing the house dynamic as opposed to imposing something from the outside. The other encouraging thing, I think, from hearing you all is that there is a lot of integrated thinking. God, I remember when everything was so siloed that we actually said it was the transportation planners that were designing urban America, and they never talked to anybody else. Well, nowadays, the silos have really come down in many ways, but I caution those of you in big firms not to silo internally. I was a little, I don't know how it works, but when I saw the Gensler list of departments, I would like to think that 5 departments work together on one project rather than each working on their own project. So that's a caution. Don't let the silos now be internalized. I also think that be cautious about frameworks. We can get too dependent on them. As someone said, frameworks are a point of conversation, but let it be more than that, and then let them lead to assessment tools. I have to believe that you all really do engage community, although there are a lot of people who say they do. I was just on a panel this weekend in New Orleans with an architect who I admire greatly in terms of the work he does, but he prides himself on being very involved with community. But he said something just sort of offhandedly. He said, but you can always control the meeting. Well, you know, let's be careful that we're really not controlling the meeting. And when you have assessments afterwards, when you all do your either whatever assessments they are, get the community to write an assessment, not with your guidance, on their own. Ask them to assess the project afterwards. You might learn something different, and it might be very rewarding to find that they agree with you. Okay, and then someone did say that design is about people, and the critical point there is how involved are they in the design, and leave room for surprise. We had in New York, for example, we focused for years on controlling congestion. And it was a serious issue. Then all of a sudden came Uber. And our congestion policies, mitigation policies went out the window. Another 60,000 vehicles were on the streets. Bike lanes, great, they're going all over the city. But suddenly now there are electric bikes and electric scooters. How is that going to be managed? So all these things wind up with surprises or pushback. The energy companies, for example, and having just come from New Orleans, this is clearly true. I know it's true up here as well. The energy companies, they don't want us. They're stopping in many ways from the transfer to renewables. They're building new gas plants all over the place that are really a way to divert the conversion to solar and to wind. So they also never want to put this goes for PSEG out in California as well as in New Orleans. They never want to put the lines underground, because if you keep track of the kind of government bailout that they get after a disaster for cleaning up and repairing, it's too lucrative for them to really go what they claim is too expensive. It's too expensive up front, but it's a lot cheaper in the long run. So we not only have to be careful of surprises, we have to be careful of pushback. And last I want to say two things. Yes, there is value in the existing, and again, saving the existing and building on the existing, and not just the embodied energy, but the value of the existing is very important. Again, it's not developer driven, so it's not necessarily a policy priority. Beware of smart cities. Hudson Yards is a smart city. It's basically a gated community. There is nothing democratic about a smart city. And I saw this years ago in Celebration, has to be 10, 15 years ago. The slogan was, voice, not a vote. Think about that. Basically, democracy is eliminated in smart cities. They're developer-built, developer-controlled, and democratically nowhere. I'm waiting for the first person to try to organize a protest in Hudson Yards, and you watch how fast they are swept off the marketplace. So I advocate something that my colleague, I won't take credit for, but he calls wise cities. Use all of the new available electronic and whatever wisely, but don't give over to its control. And also always have backup, because God knows if you're electrically, if you're computer dependent, how easily there is sabotage. But we are in a period where, and I've been a couple of places where saying, well, we can't wait to really do some more with the smart city movement. And immediately I cringe, because it's the flavor of the month, unfortunately probably of the year. Toronto at least has pushed back. They're not giving the project there the expanded acreage that they wanted. And let me say one more thing about Toronto. I consider Toronto one of the most urbanistically successful cities in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's because they never lost the transit systems that we lost during the years that we gave over to national, whatever lines it was called. They have underground transit, they have overground streetcars and buses, and they've never, as Elliot mentioned, they've never lost that connection to transit. If we could only transitize, if there's such a word, more American cities, we would so easily be able to increase the density in neighborhoods comfortably. We'd be able to do all sorts of things. It's fundamental, and it's also the hardest thing to get done. And I don't mean transit in the more recent proposal for Long Island City, which was really meant to address the new development in Long Island City. I mean transit that goes to the far reaches of the city in all directions and for the people who need it most. And this is a big issue. I spend almost half my time in New Orleans. It's so interesting. New Orleans is basically car dependent, and the transit issue, there are people who spend 2 and 3 hours a day in transit because they're dependent on a bus system that hardly works. So those are key issues and key takeaways for me, and it's been a pleasure to listen to all of you, and I'm encouraged to see how things are different from when I really started looking at all these issues. Thank you.
Okay, so we're right at the end. We would like to say, is there anything that anybody else would like to say? I'm feeling we've not let you have enough space in the last little while. We had hoped to show a project, but Bruno, we showed it earlier, so I'm sorry, because I would just like to give a shout out to Bruno over here. The project that Roberta just referred to, which is the kids in the Bedside School, That was part of our local project challenge, which was launched together with this Urban Thinker Campus. And Bruno, who is from Brazil, has been an absolute marvel in helping us make all those pages, which we know you're all going to have a look at. There's a good 100 of them of projects from around the world. It has been a huge labor, and he's from the Federal University in Brazil, where we were partnering with them initially on this project. So I wanted him to be able to show one of his, but we're really out of time, and he will forgive me, I am sure. But you must go and look at the Brazilian projects in the educational section on the local project challenge. So as we wind up, I would like to say whether there's anything that Geeta would like to add, and whether there's any burning sort of takeaway that you would like to raise your hand and yell into the atmosphere that our scribes up here can take down. But Geeta, a couple of words from you.
I just wanted to say that it's been an amazing 2 days. We've learned a lot, and I hope everyone else has, and you're full of ideas, but we really do want to capture those ideas. The original idea was that this would be, we would get actionable ideas from you. So I'm going to request Amanda to write her email on that board, and for you to take it down and let us know. But better still, if you can write them down, right, and give them to us here on any kind of piece of paper. We promise you that we're going to put them all together, we're going to categorize them, and we will keep you in the loop on how we bring them together. And then those ideas will also go to the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi in February. So, so your ideas that you will generate now will really have an impact long term. So please definitely do that.
Definitely. And as we started off saying yesterday, this has been part of a sort of bigger project, and it also builds on other projects. So we have had projects that have been going around the world for the last 6 or 7 years that Elliot has been involved in as well, because we ran it's all around the same sort of issues. We ran a program called Global Studio, which was how do you work more effectively with communities of the urban poor. So every time we do something, we have this huge mailing list, and we will be sending out your ideas. We will be asking for their ideas. I'm not the most sophisticated user, but we certainly have a way of exchanging and making this happen. So we would really like it. And I have been extremely interested in this conversation, not only across disciplines, but across sectors. And so we engaged yesterday with Grow NYC. We engaged with the professions. We've engaged with education. And a lot of you have feet in many of these camps. You know, one is a citizen, one is in education, one is in the professions or whatever. And so you have different hats to put on at different times. And so I'm hoping that we'll get a real richness. So please take advantage of AGA 2200, which I now know very well because I email her all the time at Columbia. AGA, yeah, AGA, yeah. Has anybody got an idea or anything they would like to say? We have about 3 minutes, and then we will be turfed out of here. We have to quickly get out. So I think, is there anything anybody wants to shout out? That? Well, thank you too. Thank you. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Geeta. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Bruno, everybody. Okay, we do appreciate it. Thank you.